Hello, neighbors from across the canal. Oak Street resident on San Carlos Island. We're staying out in Lehigh. So I'll give you a little bit of my perspective of the storm and everything before I give you the nitty gritty on what you actually need to hear. But, for the historical record, I work at Summer Electric and I also work at Bonita Bills. We, in the days or two leading up to everything, Tuesday, basically just weren't sure where it was going yet, so we more or less at Summer picked everything up from the low level. After the last tropical storm, we knew or had at least an expectation of what we should at least get things up to potentially save any damage. But as fate would have it, after we had secured things, tied tables to different spots around the restaurants and whatnot, figured we did the best we could and just kind of waited for the inevitable. But by Tuesday night, the alarm bells started going off. Hey man, that thing's coming right your way. And by Wednesday, we had left Tuesday night up McGregor, and so by Wednesday it started to kick in, and for about a good 20 hours or so it was dry inside until even where we were up McGregor it still flooded. So there's that. Sorry if it's a little shaky, my hand's a little shaky, as I'm trying to recant all of this. I will say, like, during the process of it, you hear the roaring of the winds, and there were alarm sirens going off and everything, and it got to a point where you just don't hear the sirens anymore because they got destroyed. And I remember at one point people were talking in some of the different news feeds that I was watching, like in the live chat, like a cell tower just went down, their communications are about to go with it, and about 20 minutes later my phone stopped really working. So we went to San Carlos Island Thursday, and during the night up to that point we were getting cars driving through, sending waves into the houses and everything. That just causes more damage, so you kind of start getting frustrated a little bit. No idea what this is going to do, so we only stocked up on so much, and by Thursday people were starting to come out, and between people trying to get back to their houses and people taking the first opportunity to gawk and take their videos and things like that, traffic was an absolute nightmare because of all the debris everywhere. The grid is completely knocked out. There's no cell phone use for a good greater part of Fort Myers, especially as you get towards the islands and everything. And you hear the stories pop up. At one point we had heard about Sanibel breaking, but it was rough that first Thursday with everything being down and just the collective not being able to get a word out to anybody. That's a recurring story that you've probably heard and will soon hear again of just the communication problems and how much we rely on that stuff. So in any case, we're having to treat every intersection like a four-way, and not everybody knows how to do that. Everybody's kind of in a weird daze, in a state of panic, or in a state of, like, I guess, zen, for a lack of a better word, because you just read through it and you want to try and get out and assess things and blah blah blah. And in the days that have followed, most of the good bit, well, I wouldn't say most, but good bits of the grid are being restored, and where they're like in case of today when we come back from San Carlos Island, there were National Guard that were basically acting as traffic guards, because I guess they've seen enough accidents and wrecks and things like that, with it being a state of road anarchy since it all happened without a real grid. Traffic has just been an absolute nightmare. So if you can get through the highways, which some of them are flooded coming in here, just know that as of today traffic was still pretty freaking rough. Hopefully if you come down within the next week or more, it's a lot better state and the grid is fully restored. I mean, today FPL was almost at every intersection. Well, and the initial time after that all happened, there were traffic lights literally hanging from the poles and everything like that. As you come down closer to the island towards Hurricane Pass, I mean, you're just seeing massive yachts just blown around like they're rag dolls or they're just paper, and they're in the mangroves, they're up on top of each other, some of them are on top of cars. Like entire businesses that you're used to driving past are are just completely gone. Like, just the naughty parrot, just blown to pieces. It's just like somebody loaded a cannon with grape shot, just a shotgun and a cannon, several of them aimed it and just said, pfft. And it's like that everywhere. With our house on Oak Street, it was a case of, from looking at it over a couple of days, of going back to salvage what we can. It looks like when it fell, or when it filled with water and then the water line receded, all the water that was bottled up inside there just decided to push its way out through the sides. And I mean, and walking around San Carlos Island, in the last couple of days, it's either got blown to pieces by a passing boat or the debris, or just the wind ripped it apart slowly, or whatever water damage. So there were a few cases of it. It was like it looked at a glance like y'all might have had some minor damage in some cases, and others, everything's gone. But just do bear in mind that the water level was very high, and a lot of houses and buildings and everything like that just got completely flooded. So if you had things that you didn't want to get saturated, or if they were to get saturated, that's going to become a potential problem. The smell is going to be atrocious, because this is Florida after all. Things get hot, and when you have a damp environment inside there, a huge risk with a lot of these unopened houses that are going to have all this back bay water in there and seawater and everything else is, I don't even want to think about the smell, but as well the risk of like mold and disease that can potentially form, whatever. There's a lot of factors at play as time goes on, and the sad fact is those that are around are focused on their immediate circle. So where you've got, I don't know, everybody makes up their own statistics and figures in a lot of cases. Let's just say 40% of the houses you're currently occupied, and the other 60% are in another state, or either blown to pieces, like I said, or just inside got all sorts of saturated. And I mean, as far as those that are there, we're starting to pick things up, but if an emergency crew hasn't gone through or something like that, at least trying to tally the numbers. No one's touched your stuff. And occasionally looters have been a thing, but for the most part they're being driven off. But no one's touched your stuff in the sense of, like, nobody's opened it up, nobody has let the house ventilate, nobody's been able to get in there and start drying shit for you. We're kind of all doing that in our own areas, and kind of just like dealing with the shock of, well, this just happened. We lived through it, and we're starting to pick up the pieces. There's a lot of outside help starting to pull in. Like, while we were working at the house on Oak Street today, there was like church groups coming through, different restaurants with water and food and cleaning supplies, what have you. So people are starting to show up and have assistance and things like that for you. But it's one of those, is most of the houses out there are completely unlivable. And so it's one of those, if you're gonna come down, like, I hope in the next week or two before that happens, you have an RV to do so, or bring a camper or something like that, and prepare to rough it if you're going to actually stay out here to try and help clean up or go through your area or whatever. Or if you decide to just, well, this happened, just bulldoze the damn thing. In the case of ours, that's more or less what's going to happen with it. Like, we more or less like gone through there, picked it apart, and got what we can. And at this point, we just kind of resigned ourselves to the fact that, hey, just go ahead and put a claw through it, just destroy it and grind it up. And it's going to be a sad reality for a lot of them. There's houses on Oak Street that are complete piles of rubble at this point. And I didn't go too much past Emily Lane today, but I'm not trying to agitate your neighbors. And in some cases, I have to explain to them, hey, I'm doing this because such and such at these places is looking for immediate footage so they know what they're coming down to. And for the most part, everybody was pretty accepting of that. But in other cases, people are just so shocked that the last thing they want is, even if it is one of their neighbors coming by, fucking pull their phone out and film and stuff like that. And I do have to excuse my language, but at this point, with everything on my mind, like, the last thing I can really think about is a filter. But that's beside the point. And in saying, back to the previous point, it came to a point I was taking video and everything like that, and I wound up having to be social just because these guys are used to, at this point, which, and it's hate to say used to, but people coming through there that if they don't know you, you better not be carrying a trash bag, because you look like you're not really supposed to be there. And in my case, it's like, well, hey man, I'm your neighbor from across the canal, live on Oak Street, work for Summer, and they're like, oh, know exactly who that is. So you bond with people. You talk about what you dealt with, what your perspective was going through it. What you've been able to pull out and tally and lose, share a beer or two, and just be a community. And that's the great part about it, is the sense of community is definitely starting to show in all of this. So that's the cool part. But as of right now, the grid is still very, very stretched. And I say the grid is a very broad term, like just local infrastructure in general. Like, granted, businesses are slowly starting to roll out, but like the lines at gas stations was absolutely atrocious today. And I think in a lot of cases, they either just turn the pumps off knowing they need to think about tomorrow, or we legit are running out of gas. And that's not a prospect that's necessarily going to fly for a while, with all the generators and as much as people need to travel to and from and things like that. I hope it's not like greed and impulse buying, but this is America. It's sometimes that's just how some people are. So I don't mean to trash on anybody. We're all dealing with this in our own way. So we'll keep it friendly here on that note. Either way, still, it's just like I bring that up because it's a reality of the situation. Is just like everybody again is dealing within their way. So like it's a very, very give and take nature around here right now, and in the sense of like some people are very tense, some people are very willing to talk and hear your story and share theirs, whereas others it's just like as you would expect, it's I'm only thinking about myself. So I guess keep that in mind, as well, just all the problems that are faced with how bad it is. And as far as me, I'm gonna just pack my bag up and go back to the islands. We're staying out in Lehigh. I've got very little else, other than what I escaped with in that bag, and so I'm at a point where it's like, well, might as well help my community start rebuilding and everything. So even today, while my roommate was salvaging what he could out of the trailer, I was starting to pick up some of the immediate rubble from around the property and into some of my neighbors, because he's elderly, so he's gonna need help with his downstairs and getting things picked up and whatnot. And my two neighboring houses, they're not there most of the year, and one of them hasn't been around in a couple of years at this point. So in that regard, nobody else is going to immediately touch that to clean it up, and we got to get started at some point so we can think about rebuilding from there. So that's more or less what I'm at. Help Summer clean up and help my neighbors clean up and do what I can. So even if it's pitch my hammock up or pitch a tent and just kind of stock up on some supply and whatnot before I do, but might as well. It's this is how you rebuild after a situation like this. So that's where I'm at. I hope that all helps. Like I said, the longer you delay it, it's a two-edged double-edged sword. Like I said, the longer you delay, the worse it potentially is inside. But as well, like the sooner you come, the rougher it might be getting here. So on that note, best of luck to all of us. And if it's one of those where you don't feel like you really want to come back down to anything and just write it off, I hate to be that blunt with it, but that's a real reality that we potentially face here. So there's a lot of things that are just going to get bulldozed and going to have to get rebuilt. So on that note,